Today I'm here to talk about using outlines for your philosophy papers. I've been using outlines since I was a student and I would highly encourage it and definitely still use them. And for me, it's kind of an essential part of how I work. I wanted to talk about a couple of things. First, I want to talk about good reasons for using an outline. So there are probably more. Some of these might not be good reasons for you, but these are some that I find compelling. So you start your paper organized from the get-go. You're not scrambling to organize your paper after you've written it. It encourages laying out your argument simply, so you might notice that a certain point needs more justification, or that just laying one's argument out simply is just good for philosophy papers, because then you sort of know you need to make an additional point in order for another point to make sense. And what potential objections might be to your argument and things like that. And it's an easy way to start early. This is probably the most compelling reason for me. So starting by writing an outline is a lot less intimidating for me than writing a whole paper just from my head, and giving myself a smaller assignment of writing out a basic game plan for a paper is much more doable early on when I'm thinking about writing a paper. So I find this a really useful way to sort of thinking about these problems and parts of my argument. Outlines are also a good place to organize your research and ideas. So if you know you're going to use a piece of research, or if you're just compiling research to use and you've already laid out your argument, laid out your body paragraphs, what I'm talking about in each paragraph, then you know where to put that research, right? That quotation, and you can add citations as you go instead of doing those all last minute. And that way it's also organized for you. So as you go through your paper and you're like, oh, I want to discuss this point, you can go and do that around the quotations already in your outline. And that makes it a lot easier. And, then all your research is in one place. It's easy to find. It's a flexible structure as well and easier to edit. So if you have an outline, right, you already know what each body paragraph is about. So if you find that, oh, actually this body paragraph goes better after this one, right? It's easy to do that. It's easy to find that paragraph. You don't have to scroll through and read stuff, because you have headings and indications on your outline that'll help keep you organized, right? And I find them easier to edit working from an outline and adding content in as I go, because then if I scroll past something and I see that there's a problem, I can make a note to go back to it and just go back to it. Or as I'm going through the paper, I can edit in little chunks and then edit it as a whole. And I can be sure I haven't missed something, right? You can almost use it as a checklist in that way. So those are just some reasons for using an outline. I'm sure there are more. What should an outline include? For my outlines, I make sure I include my thesis, and I'll put that in a section called Introduction. Some people like to work conclusion first and then, rewrite their thesis in the introduction later. I don't work that way, but you absolutely could. You should, however, have a thesis statement in your introduction, and your thesis statement is just going to be simply stating your argument. It may even indicate the structure of your paper, depending on how complex that structure is, right? And then between your introduction and conclusion should be your body paragraphs, and you should divide those according to how you're arguing. So how everybody organizes their body paragraphs can be different depending on the paper, that specific paper. So let's talk about some of those pieces, right? So your intro should include your thesis statement. That's probably the most important part of your intro. Before that thesis statement, any information your reader absolutely needs in order to understand your thesis statement, that's all you have to have before your thesis. So introducing that you're talking about a specific philosopher and their idea of something might be important, but you don't need a lot of extra fluff in here, right? Your introduction can be very short. It doesn't have to have a lot of content in it. The main thing is getting to that statement of, this is going to be my argument for the paper, right? So your thesis statement should just be your argument stated simply, and it may also reflect the structure of your paper. So if your argument is philosopher X is wrong for reasons A, B, and C, right? Then that should be your thesis. And then your body paragraphs can be reasons A, B, and C. So each body paragraph should address one point, one big idea. I've seen a lot of people structure their body paragraphs differently, and that's fine, but sticking to one big subject per body paragraph is important. So what do I mean by different structures of body paragraph? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. So your conclusion should just restate your thesis and sort of tie your paper together in a nice bow. So basically, you're going to restate your argument in light of what you said in the body paragraphs. So I'm going to talk about like 3 basic types of body paragraph, but these can be mixed and matched. So I'm going to talk about evidence or point body paragraph, exegesis body paragraph, and objection body paragraph. But this is not like a, they have to be discrete. It can only cover evidence, it can only cover exegesis, or it can only cover objections. You might be somebody who uses like evidence body paragraphs primarily, but then addresses objections at the end of that paragraph very, very briefly. It depends on how substantive, how much space that objection is going to take up, right? So you decide how those body paragraphs are structured, but you should stick to one topic per body paragraph. So if you're talking about like one point in this body paragraph, you shouldn't be making objections about another topic at the end, right? You should stick to that topic. So this is an evidence body paragraph. I call it evidence, but it's basically just your basic body paragraph where you address a point, provide evidence, explain how the evidence supports your conclusion or disagree with the evidence, and then defend your own assertions, right? Whatever it is. So my basic recipe for these is I have a topic sentence where I just introduce what I'm talking about, right? And then I'll lead up to the evidence, quote or paraphrase evidence, right? Talk about how that evidence supports my assertions or is wrong, depending on what I'm saying about that evidence. And then I'll do that however many times for however many pieces of evidence I have on this specific topic. And then I'll go to a transition sentence to transition to the next body paragraph. So you might have an outline that has just 3 evidence type body paragraphs, but you might have some of these other kinds. So this is your basic body paragraph that you learn about in English, basically in English and composition classes. So then there's exegesis body. So this focuses on explaining something you need for the rest of the paper. So these would usually come earlier. So say I am writing a philosophy of religion paper, right? And I'm talking about a specific concept of God, right? I'm arguing about a specific concept of God in the paper. Then I need to explain what that concept is because there's many different concepts of God, right? So I need to basically lay out terms that might be understood differently by different people. I'm going to talk about what I'm using for the purposes of this paper and my argument. It also might just be setting up another author's argument. So then in the subsequent paragraphs, you're going to tear it down or defend it in light of objections. That's what the exegesis body does. It just sets up what you're using for the rest of the paper, what you're discussing. Then there's the objections body paragraph. So this is where you're going to just address objections. This might also be part like a larger body paragraph, like I said, where you're dealing with a specific topic and then objections concerning that topic. But having a separate body paragraph for objections is also fine. Then you can address maybe more than one type of objection. So this is an example of an outline, and I just picked like a really simple topic for this outline. You don't need to have read the books that I'm discussing. I'm skipping out the part in the introduction where I introduce what books I'm discussing anyway. But this is an example of what outline might look like. So this is blown up, but it's in 12-point font Times New Roman. You should try to start out your outline using how you're going to have to turn in the paper. That's how your outline should be, just to save yourself some steps, right? When I'm working on an outline, I'll usually have title as the title, but just don't forget to change that later. So here I have introduction, and then I have my body paragraphs and my conclusion. And for this example, I use all three types of body paragraph I just discussed, just to explain how those might work, right? So this is the thesis for this example. While Nozick and Rawls both present compelling theories of what a just society should entail, Nozick's minimal state, based on negative rights, cannot protect the rights of disenfranchised persons. Now, obviously, this is a very specific topic. You don't need to have read the Theory of Justice by John Rawls or Anarchy, State, and Utopia by Nozick to understand the example, but I'm basically discussing these 2 theories of justice and saying this one does not address this specific group and thereby is weaker in some way, right? So for body 1, I decided on using an exegesis paragraph. And so here I've just written a note to myself because this outline is just a plan for the paper. It doesn't have to be really deep right now. This is just the first phase, right? This is the initial writing stage for me. So, and if I was doing an outline, I wouldn't include this in parentheses exegesis paragraph. I might just put like terms or explanation of whatever. So here in this first body paragraph, I plan to explain what I mean by disenfranchised persons, give a hypothetical example that I can use to evaluate the same disenfranchised person, how the same disenfranchised person might fare in each system. So if you take in logic, you might know about counterexamples. Essentially, what I'm doing in this paragraph is I'm just explaining a term, disenfranchised persons, and then I'm providing a counterexample, which I plan to use for both the Rawlsian state and Nozick state to explain how Nozick state doesn't address these people, or this specific counterexample. So for body paragraph 2, I'm going to use that hypothetical example I talked about and just apply it to the Rawlsian state. So this is an evidence paragraph, so it's going to follow that formula I set out, right? So my topic sentence might be, while disenfranchised people might be a little worse off than others in the Rawlsian state, they would still have some level of security and autonomy, right? That might be my topic sentence. And then I'd introduce my evidence. So I'd talk about principles that Rawls discusses, I'd provide a quotation, and then I'd explain how those principles protect the disenfranchised person in my example in this state. So I would talk about how my example applies to this specific theory. And I might do that for a couple different quotes by Rawls and explain like how the hypothetical example, how this person would fare in the state. And then I'd have a transition sentence where I'd say something really simple that, you know, contrasts the upcoming paragraph with this one. So I might say, the disenfranchised person does not fare so well in Nozick's minimal state. Just really simple, because all it's there for is to sort of adjust the reader so that they're ready to absorb what you've laid out in the next paragraph. So then I do the same thing for body paragraph 3, but for Nozick's minimal state, talking about how, you know, it's bad for the disenfranchised person in my example. So I'd have a topic sentence where I'd explain the minimal state because it's based on negative rights, protect disenfranchised persons because whatever. And then I'd use evidence from Nozick's Anarchy, State, and Utopia. And I'd discuss how things might be worse in this specific scenario, how they aren't protected in these certain ways. And then for body paragraph 4, and I'd have that transition sentence, right? Of course, some defense could be made for Nozick on these specific points, and then I go straight into the objections paragraph. And in my research, I might find that there are people who've already written about Nozick's minimal state and how it can address people in different situations, people who are less well off, people who might not have the ability to stand up for themselves, who might have communication problems because they don't have that like positive rights, right? So they might not be provided like a translator or something like that. And I might, you know, address those objections by people who support Nozick and explain how, you know, my argument still stands that these people are not addressed as they should be, right? That their rights would not be protected as well. And then for the conclusion, I would restate the thesis in light of what I've said in the body paragraphs. So you don't really have to understand Nozick or Rawls to understand this example, but essentially in the introduction, just laying out my basic argument. In the body paragraphs, I'm just providing what I need to accomplish that goal, right? And I'm sticking to one basic or one big idea per paragraph. What I do in that paragraph, how I address that might be different for each paragraph. It might be I address a different piece of evidence in each paragraph. It might be that I'm addressing objections in one of the paragraphs. That's fine. But I just need to make sure that I lay it out simply in outline. So then as I add quotations, as I add my explanation and as I go, it's organized so that I know what I'm saying. So it's easier to convey to the reader what I'm saying because I can see where things aren't explained. I can see where I'm missing something. So that's basically it. I highly recommend using outlines. I hope you found this useful, and thank you.